All right, ladies and gentlemen, and whoever has the honor to see this connection happen. My name is Nathan Alexander. I'm the founder of Leader of the Pack, which is a group of men, a brotherhood of men that believe in standing up, leading, and protecting. One of the members of our brotherhood that I am most honored, he's not going to say, he's not going to want me to say that, but that I am most honored to have and truly, truly call a brother, is Mike Vasquez, who is, apart from being an incredibly humble man, a father, a husband, was a paramedic, and now is
I'm still a paramedic, training to be an IC paramedic.
an IC paramedic, a man who truly takes responsibility to the greatest extent. Mike is going to tell us more about who he is and the service that he did, but he's a Marine. And I feel that it's very important. I just said to Mike, now what's the aim of us doing this, right? Very informal, two brothers connecting, and whoever's watching gets to see it, right? And the point, the goal that I have is for people to understand that in order to dance and sing, one needs to know how to cry and mourn. One needs to be able to connect to pain in order to truly celebrate. And all of us as civilians of all of our countries around the world that are watching this get to celebrate life. We get to go to the beach, and we get to have barbecue, and we get to hang out with our children and make money and lose money and be married and all of those types of things. And that is on the foundation of the soldiers and the people that protect us. And I believe that society forgets that too often. And so the aim of this little interaction, this big interaction over here, is for people to really understand what war takes from a soldier when he or she is deployed, and even when they come home afterwards. So, Mike, thank you for doing this with me.
Thank you, Nathan, and thank you for taking this time to recognize Memorial Day and all that it stands for. Like you said, I was in the Marines from 2001 until 2011. Some combat in there, but really I want to talk about the life and sacrifice of Sergeant Michael E. Bitts, who was killed in Iraq in March of 2003 amongst the first American forces in the war in Iraq. So Sergeant Michael E. Bitts, I'll try to get a photo for you, Nathan, but was the father of my three eldest children, married to my wife, who deployed just after Christmas in the early days of 2003, and was part of the initial ground offensive into Iraq. He was a sergeant in the U.S. Marine Corps. He was much loved by his men. He was an Amtrak crew chief. So the Amtrak, of course, it's that big lumbering, almost tank-looking personnel character that the Marines uses. It's designed to move, basically troops from sea to shore, but the Marine Corps, being the Marine Corps, make do, improvise, adapt, overcome, use them basically as armored personnel carriers. So that was his role in there. Get into the specifics of everything later, but I just think it needs to be pointed out. This is a man who was a great Marine, but went through so much to get to that point. In and out of jail as a young person, and all kinds of, grew up very hard. It was not, and a lot of Marines do grow up hard, and they find in the Marine Corps that sense of discipline and worth. And that was his story. The Marine Corps literally both cost him his life, but saved his life. My wife's been very gracious with me and told me, I have full license to share all these details because it is their story and it is real and it's raw.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, by the time he got to Iraq in 2003, he'd already been through so much and overcome so much just in his own personal life. Um, I don't know if you had.
How old was he when he was deployed?
So he was 31. So he joined the Marine Corps a little bit later,
Yeah.
but went straight to the top. He had like our personal fitness test. He maxed that out. He was a Marine Corps water instructor, which is a massive achievement, massive amounts of courage. He had some time as a U.S. Marine Corps recruiter. Again, for someone who was not book smart, a massive achievement, going from Amtracker into that field. This is a man who found God very late in his life after everything else had fallen apart. His first marriage had fallen apart, and who loved God with such a heart the last 2 years of his life, who'd get to work early and read his Bible, who recommitted his vows to my wife 6 months before he deployed. This is a man who is totally transformed um, by his love of God and his desperation. Um, and yeah, like I said, by the time he got to Iraq in 2003, he'd already survived so much. So even at the age of 31, he'd lived 100 lifetimes. He'd known
Wow.
poverty, he'd known jail, he'd known divorce, he'd known drugs, everything that a Marine can get into, he got into it. He was a man who had his face fixed like flint. And I say that with the utmost sincerity. This is a man with the maturity at 31 to write in his letters home, his final letters home, please don't be mad at me if I don't come home. Almost like
Wow.
he knew what was in front of him. And he was no political science expert, but he knew what he'd been through. He knew what he was getting into. It's funny in the Marine Corps, anytime you get good food, beware, because something, you're about to get sent into something. Yeah. At that time, the troops were getting fattened up, so he knew it. He knew it was coming. So yeah, and I think it was January 2003. He leaves my wife, who's then pregnant with twins, 7 months pregnant. Twins he never even gets to see. They're born in February, and then he dies in March. So a man who there was just so much hope. He was studying to get a transfer to Australia. My wife and him wanted to move. He knew that he couldn't do this forever, but he was just a little bit too late on a lot of things. It's funny, his past, and I guess as men, our past eventually catches up to us. And despite all he'd done in his last couple of years, there was still a lot of demons that haunted him. But to his credit, he probably could have got out, with some type of exception that his wife was pregnant. But to his credit, he charged on. He knew his Marines were going. He was going to be there. He was going to lead them as a sergeant. And that's exactly what he did.
So he missed the birth.
He missed the birth. Yep.
Because so he was deployed.
21st. He was in some Kuwaiti staging area during that time. My wife thinks he might have got one of the letters with photos, but that was early days, photos and letters, that was all delayed and edited. And yeah, it was all quite early days. So we don't know if he ever saw his twins. Of course, they were born healthy, a young girl and a young boy, Caleb and Taylor. He chose his son's name because my oldest son is Joshua. He's like, I want Caleb and Joshua again. This is his love and his just simple, almost the faith of a child. He's like, they are going to have to work things out together. So he really, for someone who grew up tough and, didn't have a lot of formal education, he knew what he was going into.
Wow. And so he wrote to your wife saying, these are the names that I want for the children?
Well, so they had decided the names beforehand. The letters were sort of his chance to there was lots of forgiveness sought. There was lots of, lighthearted humor. He's still a Marine at the end of the day. Um, but the clear theme of, I don't think this is going to go well. I want you taken care of. You know, don't, just the words, don't be mad at me if I don't come back. We say, I think that sounds kind of morbid, but he had to be real. He had to be real about everything.
Yeah. That it's I think a very heavy point. It's like, I know in Israel, not many soldiers are telling their mothers or their wives where they're going, what they're doing, and it used to be, and still is, because certain things are secret, but most of the time it's because you just don't want them to worry. You just don't want them to, to let them do their thing. But at the same time, if you're not preparing your family for what the reality could be, it's also like, what's the balance of being real of, hey, I don't know if I'm coming home, and at the same time, but don't worry, get on with life.
Mm.
It must be such a difficult, being pulled at both sides of, what do I do? How real am I with them, in order to prepare them for what reality could be, but at the same time not stop their life from moving forward and doing and enjoying, while the soldiers are off doing their thing.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And a lot of times, frontline troops aren't given a lot of information, and there wasn't a lot of time to prepare.
Mhm.
His will, his power of attorney, that's a whole separate topic. But there was all kinds of problems that made life very hard on my wife early on. This is a time when America wasn't prepared. Donald Rumsfeld, what he say? You go to battle with the army you have, not the one that you want. Well, that sort of mentality um, made a tough situation even tougher. My wife had, with the Marine Corps, when you lose someone, they send a notifying officer. The day she was having to deal with that, she was also having to deal with reporters, just
Oh man.
circling like vultures. And this is an Australian girl living in North Carolina without any citizenship, without any real prospects, who just gave birth to two twins and has lost her husband. And there was a Congressman Walter Jones, North Carolina. He's passed away recently, but he stepped in like an absolute father figure, and he guided her through so much. He ended up getting a couple bills passed. So now the media has to give, I think it's 48 hours before they approach a surviving.
Mm.
So all kinds of things. She had a great church um, that was there for her. She had people going to bat for her. And because of the way he died, basically gave his life. He didn't die. I shouldn't say he died. He gave his life because it was a choice. To get into the actual specifics, because it's quite relevant.
Yeah.
His trap was hit. He could have stayed with it. No one would have faulted him, but he took up, with the Marines inside of it, got them out, and then joined the offensive. He was in ammunition. He was just going well beyond anything that anyone would have expected. He at one point refused medical attention. Um, it's I have the citation here. He was awarded the posthumous Silver Star. This is The Marine Corps does not give out posthumous Silver Stars to just anyone. So he that day, the culmination of everything he'd experienced, the good of the last 2 years, and even the bad, he knew what he was up against, and he rose to the occasion. Um,
Wow.
So posthumous Silver Star has since been a school, an elementary school in North Carolina named after him. Um, just an incredible legacy he's left for all of us, really. You know, I'm inspired by it because I'm raising those children, and that was always our guiding thing. Every March we do something to recognize his sacrifice. Um, and yeah, I guess as we talk about Memorial Day and your earlier points about what it is to be, to have the freedoms we have in this beautiful yet imperfect country. It's born by honest kids like him, who when they could fall back, they press in. And you can debate why we're in Iraq over and over, but he didn't know any different than just coming alongside the Marines he was with. And that spirit is, I think that's what Memorial Day is really all about.
Mm. Is the spirit of self-sacrifice, of
Absolutely.
pushing forward.
Because
Yeah.
he could have gotten out of that. For every Sergeant Michael Bitts, there's 1,000. I've been to combat. It's real easy to disappear into the cover. It takes a whole different mindset to be the one charging. I've been on both sides. Anyone who tells you they haven't is lying.
Yeah.
He didn't. He had one chance, one day, and he went in.
Mike, can you tell us more of the story of what actually happened?
Yeah, I'll do better, Natan. I won't do it justice. So I'll read the citation if that's all right. It's from the Secretary.
Sure. Wow.
So attention to order. President of the United States takes pride in presenting the Silver Star Medal posthumously to Sergeant Michael E. Bitts, United States Marine Corps, for services set forth in the following: for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against the enemy while serving as crew chief and assistant section leader, 3rd Assault Amphibious Vehicle Section, Company C, 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines, Task Force Tarwa, 1 Marine Expeditionary Force during Operation Iraqi Freedom on 23 March 2003. During the attack on Al-Naziriyah, Iraq, Sergeant Bitts' vehicle sustained a direct hit from a rocket-propelled grenade, setting it on fire. Aware that there were several casualties on board, he maneuvered his vehicle to the company's defensive perimeter. He immediately assisted in moving the wounded to the casualty collection point. Without an amphibious assault vehicle to command and under unrelenting enemy small arms and artillery fire, he picked up his rifle and joined a squad of 3rd Platoon in a deliberate assault. His efforts substantially aided the platoon, and after the squad sustained several casualties, Sergeant Bitts ignored his own wounds and helped in loading the others onto an evacuation vehicle. Despite receiving unrelenting fire, Sergeant Bitts mounted a different vehicle to provide security for the casualties. While escorting the wounded during movement, Sergeant Bitts was mortally wounded by enemy fire when his vehicle sustained a direct hit from a rocket-propelled grenade. By his outstanding display of decisive leadership, unlimited courage in the face of heavy enemy fire, and utmost devotion to duty, Sergeant Bitts reflected great credit upon himself and upheld the highest traditions of the Marine Corps and the United States Naval Service. For the President, Gordon R. England, Secretary of the Navy.
Wow.
And this is the actual citation here. So that's the legacy that he left. It gives me a lump in the throat to think of it, what this man gave and the great cost.
It's absolute self-sacrifice.
Absolutely.
It's like,
I count at least 4 times just from that citation where he could have been well within himself to just back off, to take the easy out. But he didn't.
yeah. My mind goes to, okay, now talk to men about the excuses that we make in life and all of that, but that's not what this space is about. It's about honoring um, honoring those that do have it, that will for true self-sacrifice, um, and feeling the pain for, for his family, for his wife, for his children. Um, I'm going to ask a personal question, and really you don't have to answer it, okay?
Yep.
I know you're a man who is always striving for better, and you're actually quite hard on yourself, right? You get annoyed at me for being hard on myself, but yet
You're a
you
leader.
expect, yeah. With that in mind, how does, I'm not talking about your inner family workings, that's no one's business, but how do you, as the father of these children and more, keep his self-sacrifice and lessons to learn alive, um, in those children, and at the same time have space for yourself? The mourning of your wife for another husband, and for your children for another father, but yet you have taken on being that husband and that father 500%, like more than so many other men that I know. It's not about a comparison, but how do you maintain that space for mourning, respect, and honor for him, and at the same time be also a Marine and a father and a husband in your home?
So yeah, two things on that. One, he made it very easy. Yes, I'm raising another man's children, but I'm raising the children of a hero. I'm not raising the children of someone who's forgotten about their kids, or who's in and out of their lives, or who's hurt them deeply. I get to just show them the hero that he was. And
Wow.
we're real with them, but he made it easy. He also made it easy in the sense that his will outlined his request that he wanted to actually be interred here in Australia. So
Mm,
his burial site, his ashes were actually sent here because that's where almost like he knew he wanted his family to grow up here in Australia. So, like I
mm,
said, every chance we can, at least once a year, we go down there. I think you saw one of the memorials we did for him a couple
yep.
years back, um, to just never forget his sacrifice. Um, and then the second
Yeah.
part of that, to be real, it's been hard. When you raise in the children of a hero, you have no choice but to be a hero yourself. So 2005, I went to Iraq, and my wife, who's absolutely extraordinary, she was pregnant with our son. So she yet again said goodbye to another Marine with great uncertainty, pregnant, no idea, what was going to happen this time around. And thank God I survived. It was 2005. Iraq was in a really bad place. I survived only because I aligned myself with the Iraqi security forces. The loyalty of working with them is the only thing that kept me alive.
What do you
That,
mean by that? Can I ask
well,
more about that?
you hear a lot about, oh, you can't trust them, in terms of the security forces. And part of that is true. But when you have the loyalty of a host nation force, and they trust you and they know that you've got their back, there is nothing they won't do for you. So I was in
Wow.
some really tough spots, but between their loyalty and my interpreter, and you have the force of the United States Marine Corps behind you, but there's nothing that can substitute for the loyalty and the local knowledge of host nation troops.
Yeah.
So that decision, that privilege really of being able to work with them on that deployment wasn't always easy, but the Marines, we made it work. We made it work.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, raising the children of a hero, it did push me a little bit, probably more than I should have. And there was, my wife will be the first to tell you, when I got back from Iraq, I was a different person. Not that I wanted to go back, but not really deserving to be home. And there's a big difference in those two things. A lot of times people think, oh gosh, what is this guy? He wants to go back to Iraq, leave his wife, and a lot of Marines do. A lot of Marines can't cope at home because they don't feel they deserve to be there.
What
And
does
that
that
was,
mean?
well, you don't, of everyone who's given far more. So to come home and, put your feet up and live the good life and relax, like I think a lot of veterans are kind of expected to do, oh, you should be happy you're home. Well, yeah, I survived, but a lot of good people who gave far more than me didn't. So that's a struggle. That was a massive struggle.
So
And
in
yeah,
essence,
that put me on a path of, Arabic night school and a master's degree, Middle Eastern study, all, trying to make it all, make this sacrifice worth it. And yeah,
in a
so,
way, still be in Iraq and Australia.
well, yeah, um it's something that our whole families, our whole family was affected by Iraq and still is. There's no part of our family that Iraq didn't touch, both with, my children losing their first dad, and then, what it did to me when I got back. And
Yeah.
it's tough. There's a lot of Iraq veterans, and I still struggle to explain why on earth we were there to my children. I can't look them in the eye and tell them it was for this or for that. But I try to just bring us all back to what, to what he did that day. 'Cause in my mind, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a lot of that is
It's
for the
such a
public to decide. But I think Memorial Day, we've got to remember, we got to put politics aside and just remember what these men and women have done.
yeah. I think that's a really, really important point to hear from a Marine. When you're on the battlefield, there's no left and right, there's no Republican and Democrat. In the mess hall, there still may be, right? But when you're under fire, there's nothing. There's nothing and there's everything. All of those boundaries just drop. It's politics drop, religion drops, and the inner fight to survive is what comes out,
Yep.
rather than so much stuff that we get covered over with back home. And so,
I
yeah,
matter
go on,
in the
mate.
time with just the spouse that's left behind to make sense of it all. I think that gets forgotten a lot on Memorial Day, because there's parades. We tend to do pretty well honoring the fallen and the veterans, but the unrecognized spouse who's there behind the scenes, and there is no harder job, trying to make sense of things, trying to, you know, keep things going and support their partner. Like, I don't know if I certainly wouldn't have got through what I went through without, my wife. I won't even say the word encouragement. It's more than that. It's a partnership, and especially in the Marine Corps, like, things change so quickly. And the wives in our group had the motto "Semper Gumby," because you just never knew what was going to come next. And
Wow.
when I talk about his sacrifice, like, she was a massive part of that. They got, like I said, they rededicated their vows 6 months before he left. And, what I see in them and all their photos is, I think, when I think of God's plan for what a marriage is, and how one partner is meant to lift up another. In those
Mm,
last months, that was their story. They
wow.
truly did.
Wow.
So yeah, got
You
to
know,
definitely take a moment to recognize the spouses in all this.
yeah, that's something that I think, because Israel is a society of soldiers, right? From the time our kids are 13 years old, they're thinking about what unit they're going into, and the family moves with that. Memorial Day in Israel, the entire nation feels it. It's like you turn on the TV and there are stories after story after story of soldiers. You turn on the radio and it's the traditional sad memorial music for Memorial Day that has been around since 1952, right? There was before that, but they changed it to a specific day, 1952, right? You see, even, our son is named after a soldier who was killed. That family, the Kalangel family, and Daniel Mandel, who you guys were at his grave, their homes are packed, packed the entire day, the entire day.
Mm.
And Daniel died probably more than 15 years ago, but yet his soldiers still come to his mother and sit with him on Memorial Day. It's like it's a national Memorial Day, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to get people outside Israeli society to understand. Like, if you know someone who is a widow, through the military, send her some flowers on Memorial Day. Pick up the phone. Like, if there's some, lady or man down the road who is a veteran, go sit with them. Go ask them the stories, because telling the stories are such a big part of the healing, right? Like, where people are worried to sit with someone and feel their pain or see them cry, it's all a process of healing. It's a process of acceptance. And so, like, anyone who's watching this, if you know someone who their wife was left behind, and they're mourning their son or their husband or their wife, whoever it is, on Memorial Day, like, do something about it. Do something. If you're worried about, like, or I'm going to feel uncomfortable, well, then just think about the story that we heard about being uncomfortable, you know, where it could have any time stopped and said, I feel uncomfortable, I'm out, I don't feel like dying today, but yet he went forward again and again and again and again. And so, yeah, I hear what you're saying about,
And I love that tradition. I love that Israeli tradition.
yeah, it's
And when I
important.
keep about my wife's early days, there wasn't a lot of that. And I think we could all learn a lot from the way that Israeli culture honors those left behind. So
Yeah.
thank you for doing that today, Nathan, with this, because yeah, my wife's given a couple of interviews in what now, 18 years.
Wow.
You know, my children, like, no one reaches out to them really in any official capacity.
Mm,
So we keep his memory alive as best we can, but I think we could all do more, myself included.
yeah. Amen. Amen. All of us. And so, yeah, let's, Mike, thank you so much. And thank you to your wife for giving you permission to share this. And we honor her and your children. And
Mhm.
just pray that, well, how about you finish off with a prayer for Memorial Day?
Father, I just thank you for this time to reflect, and I thank you for Natan's heart to make sure that this day is not forgotten and is not something that we take for granted. I thank you for all that I've learned from the sacrifice of Sergeant Michael Bitts and lots of other great Marines that I've served with who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. I hope that we have a heart for these men and these women on Memorial Day, and never take for granted their sacrifice and their love for life, and live on, because there's really no excuse in terms of what we go through on an average day compared to what they've been through. So thank you, Father, for this time.
And we honor and we thank Sergeant Michael Bitts for everything that he did in his life and after and beyond, and sending us the difficult but important messages for us as men and women to realize on this day. And may his memory be a blessing for your family, for you, for your wife, for your children, and for everybody who has listened to this. Mike, thank you very much. It's not easy. It's not easy. I know you're an amazing man, and you hate you don't like that.
I
You
love
don't like
talking to you. It's a great privilege.
all right,
Thank
brother.
you.
Thank you so much. God bless.